It's Halloween and horror movies are all the rage right now. So what better than to watch one of the horror movies that really popularized the genre, like Frankenstein from 1931. Based on the book by Mary Shelley, written in 1816 and published in 1818, Frankenstein is the second of the Universal horror movies that feature, well, a monster. And not just any monster, but the monster. And yes, let's just get it out of the way. The monster is not called Frankenstein. At most, you can call it Frankenstein's monster, but Frankenstein is the name of Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, who in this movie is called Henry for some reason. And what's the best way to sum up this movie? Influential. Influential, yeah, and you will see why in a minute, because this movie has done so much for the horror industry, and actually film industry as a whole, that it's pretty important we talk about it. But first, a disclaimer by Edward Van Sloan.
Mr. Carl Lemley feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Terrifying. So we start off the movie in a cemetery where Dr. Frankenstein and his assistant Fritz are ready to dig up a corpse for experiments. And yeah, this is a pretty iconic scene because this would set the latest standards for every grave robbing here on after. The assistant Fritz is played by Dwight Frye, by the way, who some of you will remember as Renfield from Universal's Dracula just released prior to this one. That's another thing, because these movies were filmed so close to each other, there are certain recurring characters, like Edward Van Sloan, who played Abraham Van Helsing in Dracula also. But yeah, he pretty much plays the same role here as Dr. Waldman. It's just as if the character stepped out of one movie and into the other. But hey, it's Van Sloan and his acting and accent is so awesome that I will allow it.
Here we have one of the most perfect specimens of the human brain that has ever come to my attention at the university. And here the abnormal brain of the typical criminal. Observe, ladies and gentlemen, the scarcity of convolutions on the frontal lobe as compared to that of the normal brain, and the distinct degeneration of the middle frontal lobe.
Dr. Frankenstein soon realizes that he will need a brain for his experiments, and he sends Fritz to a medicine college to retrieve one. Initially, he picks up the normal brain, but he's distracted like an idiot and drops it, so he'll have to settle for the criminal one. This later will explain why the monster goes on a rampage. Another thing to notice is that the set pieces look gorgeous. The laboratory, the graveyard, the later mountain scenes, they all look perfect. But one thing are the set pieces. How are the actors? Well, we have Dr. Frankenstein's fiancée Elizabeth and his friend Victor. Wait, Victor. But that's Frankenstein's name in the book, whereas in the book his friend's name is Henry, but in the movie Frankenstein's name is Henry and his friend's name is Fritz. Okay. Anyway, they travel to Dr. Waldman, who's played again by Edward Van Sloan, who is Frankenstein's former professor and teacher, and he clues us in on some medical science.
Herr Frankenstein is a most brilliant young man, yet so erratic. He troubles me. Well, you know, his researches in the field of chemical galvanism and electrobiology were far in advance of our theories here at the university. In fact, they had reached a most advanced stage. They were becoming dangerous. Herr Frankenstein was interested only in human life. First to destroy it, then recreate it. There you have his mad dream.
So they all decide to go pay Frankenstein a visit at his laboratory, which is conveniently haunted by lightning and thunder effects. Inside we see another set masterpiece and a prototype for all mad scientist laboratories to come. It just looks like the archetypical mad scientist lab, doesn't it? While he's initially irritated by the disturbance, Dr. Frankenstein instead wishes them to come in so that they can witness his triumph.
Oh, can't you see I mustn't be disturbed? You'll ruin everything. My experiment is almost completed.
But is he truly crazy?
You're crazy.
Crazy, am I?
We'll see whether I'm crazy or not. Come on out.
Looks sane to me. And the whole scene where the monster comes to life is just a masterpiece in and of itself. I mean, just look at this. This is so iconic that it has been spoofed and redone so many times in countless other films. And cue the most famous line of the movie.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
While everything does seem successful at first, Dr. Waldman does caution Dr. Henry Frankenstein not to play God, because that will lead to bad things.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
But say, how does the monster look? Well, let's reveal that in one of the best reveals in cinema history. At first, the monster obeys Dr. Frankenstein's orders, but of course Fritz has to fuck it up with a torch, which the monster is not too fond of. Ever wondered where the monster being afraid of fire comes from? There you go. So to prevent any further incidents, they chain up the monster in the basement where Fritz, like a dick, whips and throws a torch at the monster's face. And he's killed off camera. And while it is pretty tame by today's standards, that chilling scream is still haunting me.
Listen, what's that? What's that? It's Fritz.
It works. It just works. By now, Frankenstein realizes that his monster will have to be destroyed, and they sedate it for later dissection by Dr. Waldman, who is soon killed. In the movie's defense, it would have been very short if it ended here. You may think it's horrifying that the monster escapes, but there's a wedding to celebrate, so it's all good. I'm sure he won't be back.
House of Frankenstein. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the monster stumbles across a little girl and plays with her dandelions by throwing them in the water. Well, that's sweet. I'm sure this won't lead to any... Shit happens. After this, the movie begins to follow the book more closely by having the monsters show up at Frankenstein's residence and attack his bride. However, unlike in the book, she survives. The father of the drowned girl shows up in town, and by this time, an angry mob has to be formed, because by God, we need something to kill.
Ludwig, you will search the woods. Those are your group. Herr Frankenstein, you will take to the mountains. Those are your people. I will lead the third group by the lake. Remember, get him alive if you can, but get him!
Frankenstein is attacked by the monster, but the rest of the villagers manage to corner it at the windmill, where they promptly set fire to the place. And thus ends the monster's reign of terror, that had just begun a few minutes earlier. Finally, because we need a happy ending, we find out Frankenstein is alive and recovering. The end. So that's Frankenstein from 31, and what can be said? Influential. From the iconic scenes and the set pieces to Boris Karloff's unique appearance as the monster, this movie has gone on to inspire so many things I cannot even begin to cover them all. But is it any good? Yes, I think it is. And audiences back then thought so too, because the movie was followed by Bride of Frankenstein, The Son of Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and so on. There's so much to this that I cannot even begin to cover it all. Well, I could, but I'm out of time. So instead I'll just say this. Happy Halloween, thanks for watching, watch the movie if you hadn't already, and take care for now.